So yeah, to do it twice is going to be kind of, it's going to eat up that budget really quick. You know, you have to climb up there, you have to set all the gear up and stuff compared to just slinging it together with some rope. Just to,
all right. So do we want to then hold off on?
Why the fuck?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning, everyone.
Oh.
I think Damon's wrapping up some work before the meeting.
Boy, I wake up and then I look at myself in this screen and I realize another one of those bad hair days. Funny waking up like that.
There's no such thing as a bad hair day. It's just
I guess
hair.
that's true.
Just hair.
A hair, an expressive hair day, I guess is what I'll call it.
Your hair has spirit.
Yeah,
You know.
for sure.
I think, can you hear me?
Yep.
I think bad hair days went out when COVID came in.
Oh yeah, fair enough.
Hello all.
Whoa, Damon. Looks like
Yep.
Looks like you're in the field.
I'm in the field today. Yeah, unfortunately, I've got I might have to pop out for a second later in the meeting.
All right.
So.
Thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
As long as you're not driving.
Nope, no, not driving. I'll even try and get a background in here if I can on my iPad. But there we go, virtual background. Yeah.
Why don't you put on some good music? Just kidding, just kidding.
Hey, Lorena, I just saw your name as a listing as the professor of an advanced GIS class. I never knew you were such a GIS whiz. Cool. That's awesome.
My sound working. God.
I can't hear you. I can't hear what you're saying, Lorena.
Oh.
Oh,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
yeah.
That's better.
Yeah. Thank you. No, yeah, I started working at PCC. That's why I kind of missed some meetings last month. But I'm enjoying the work. It's learning, a lot of learning, and yeah, and engage with the students. So.
Cool. Well, I think I may just take your class at some point.
No, yeah, you're welcome.
Brush up on my GIS. Yeah.
It was great. Lorena served as my TA for a GIS class way back when she was just, what was that, like 4 years ago, Lorena? Yeah.
Yes, 2017, the winter, I guess, yes.
Yeah, and then it's just been lots of learning since then and getting really savvy. And the best way to learn something is, of course, to teach it.
No, yeah, that's true. No, that term I remember, I just took one class, one term before, and then the next term I was a TA. So yeah, I was learning. That's the way how GIS works.
Right. Do we have quorum? Are we ready? 1, 2, 3, 4.
Yes, we do.
5, 6, 7. Yep. Great. All right. I think I'll use my fist as a gavel here. We'll go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody. 21st of January, and we're working in a whole new federal administration and big changes that are happening in DC and probably many other parts of the country here.
Celebrate.
Well, we'll keep our political opinions to a minimum probably in the public meeting.
Yeah, that was off the record.
Okay, got it. We're got a pretty full agenda today, and I'd like to save some time at the end for us to talk about future agenda items and yeah, a couple of things that are coming up that I'd like to really get your feedback and on as we dig in here. I missed the November meeting and I feel like I'm really out of the loop here. So with no December meeting, so it's been several months. Happy New Year, by the way. And we're just going to start off with some public comments and see if there's anybody that has signed up, Brian, for public comments or.
Yeah, it looks like Doug Klotz is here. So I'm gonna
Right. Oh yeah, there he is.
on.
Okay, thanks, Doug.
Hey, Doug.
Hi. Hi. Okay, I got bad news and good news. Okay, first, which some of you or many of you are aware of this, the Water Bureau's new proposed requirement that all trees be 10 feet from a water line. And we knew this is going to be an issue. On the street work near me, I noticed that the water lines are marked on the street, and they were like 5 foot from the curb and 7 foot from the curb, the two streets I saw. Now, that would mean that if we have a 10-foot prohibition, that you can't use the planting strips near those, near in either of those locations. And looking at the Portland maps, which shows the water lines, almost, like 90% of them are in fact right near the curb, either the south curb of the east-west street or the east curb of the north-south street. So, I mean, potentially, if their standard was to go out 6 feet from the curb and put the water line, that'll take out half the street tree planting positions in the city. So, I'm sure Jen has been talking to them at Streets 2035 about this, but it's the more you look at it, the worse it seems. So, I hopefully will be able to get some better outcome on that. The other thing, good news, and new swales were put in near me at 30th and Market and 30th and Clay, and they put in 4 swales, and there are 2 trees in each swale. So apparently the prohibition on trees and swales has been modified. I don't know if Jen was aware of that. But I am told they're tupelos. But yeah, they look nice, and I'm glad if this is the new pattern, then I'm glad to see that. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Anybody want to follow up on that?
I would, Vivek.
Yeah, Jen.
Yeah. So in my city foresters report, I'll be giving an update on Streets 2035, and I'll address in short form or what Doug brought up about the Water Bureau 10-foot rule, as we call it. And then in response to Doug's comment about trees and swales, there is no prohibition on planting trees in stormwater facilities, and that is a practice that's been going on for a while now. Some cases that can work in stormwater facilities, in some cases it can't. So it really depends on the site. That's all.
Okay. All right. Anybody else? Okay. Thanks, Doug. Always really appreciate your eyes on the streets and your careful attention to detail around. I think it's helping to fill out the pieces that are often very, very difficult for us as we're thinking about policy stuff and things like that. Those little pieces that you're describing, I think, help us better fill out that story. So thank you. I'd like to move to reviewing minutes. We had a set of minutes sent out. Brian sent them out, I think a couple of days ago. If we give it about a couple of minutes to read them, if you would. And I need a motion eventually for passing or voting on the minutes. All right, Greg.
I guess it's the second page, title 11, the second bullet. I saw the BC zoning and I thought, what is that? I think it might have been CX. And I think Brian does these to make sure we actually read them. So thank you.
Yeah, those.
This is a test.
Yeah. And those things don't get caught by spell check either. So thanks,
I think
Greg. Anything else?
spell
Any
check
other?
create something.
Yeah. Any other amendments? All right. Can I get a motion?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes for November as corrected.
Okay, Barbara, thank you. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, Greg. So call to vote. All in favor, approving the minutes. I can see most of you, but if you, yeah, there you go. Great. All right, looks like we're good. Any nays? Any abstentions? Okay. So moved. Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Barbara. Thanks, Greg. I was really interested in the minutes. Yeah, I wish I could have attended that meeting because there were some really interesting things coming up about Title 11 amendments, which will come up today as well. So looking forward to that conversation. I want to turn it over to Jen for our urban forestry report.
Thank you, Vivek. Let's see. Okay. Well, good morning again, everyone, and Happy New Year. It's been a while since we've seen each other. And Vivek did a little of this, but I also, before my monthly report, just wanted to recognize that there's a lot of national, international, and planetary importance that's happened since our last meeting. And some of it I've found deeply troubling and underscoring our country's centuries of institutional inequity. And some of it I found really hopeful and inspiring. So I wanted to say that I'm really grounded and buoyed up by the important public service that the urban forestry team provides, and that we here together, you commissioners with us, the city employees, provide for Portlanders, current and future. So I appreciate and value your service, and I hope that you are all navigating these tumultuous times successfully. I find I'm running out of adjectives to describe what's happening in the world today. So that said, I have 4 items in my report for you today, 5 if time allows, and I'll try to take some breaks for any questions that you have. First off, the new Parks Commissioner, Commissioner Rubio, took her council seat at the beginning of the year. And as a new commissioner, in addition to there being a lot of things in the public realm happening at present, her plate is pretty full. She's getting oriented, she and her staff are getting oriented to City Council, her bureaus, of which of course Parks is one, also Bureau of Planning and Sustainability is in Commissioner Rubio's portfolio. And there are also many timely issues that her office is going to need to handle, is working on already. So it'll take some time, but please be assured that specific topic areas for the commissioner and her staff's orientation include briefings on the urban forestry program, trees and the role of the urban forest in the city, priorities for the work we're doing, and also meeting the Forestry Commission. So I don't know when that will happen, and we'll need to be a little patient, but it is indeed on the docket, so to speak. I'm going to move to the second of my items. I wanted to share with you that the Historic Landmarks Commission and the Design Commission are actively recruiting for new volunteers to serve in some vacancies that they have. The Historic Landmarks Commission actually has 2 vacancies right now, and their role is to advise on historic design guidelines and development proposals for historic districts and properties in the city. So similar to the Forestry Commission, they have an advisory role to the city, however, it's around historic landmarks. And the Design Commission has 1 seat currently available that they're looking to fill. And they advise on design districts, special design districts, and design guidelines. If you know of any folks who might be interested in serving in either of those groups, I would encourage you to pass the word on, and we'll email you some specific information after the meeting so you'll have it to review and share on as you deem appropriate. Having some urban forest and green asset minded members on those commissions is always helpful. Any questions before I move to my third item? Okay. All right, then I will. The next one is an update on Streets 2035. The PBOT-led, I've been calling it master planning project for street design, including street trees. Next month's meeting, Forestry Commission meeting, will tentatively include an update on the Streets 2035 project. And recently, as Doug brought up, the policy committee recognized a street design change impacting trees, which is also a specific topic of Streets 2035. And that policy is indeed unilaterally enacted by the Portland Water Bureau, a requirement that no trees can be planted within 10 feet of a water main 24 inches in diameter or greater. And those water mains typically run the length of the street. And at present, many thousands of street trees are located within 10 feet of those pipes. And they have been there for decades without any known or documented water pipe issues. And also many spaces otherwise suitable for street tree planting would also be eliminated by that policy change. So I've specifically let the Streets 2035 project manager, Matt Burko, whom we've all met before, know that this has become an item of interest for the commission and that be included in the update next month. So thank you, Doug, for bringing this important issue to the policy committee's attention, and thanks to the policy committee for pursuing it as well. Any questions on that before I move to my fourth item? Good, okay. Number 4 is, as I often give you in these reports, a street tree maintenance project update. So we are continuing to work on that project. However, it's at a slower pace still than we had originally intended. And I've said that before, that's why I say still, but I just want to keep you abreast of that. As a reminder, the project is developing options and cost scenarios for the city to take responsibility for street tree maintenance rather than the adjacent property owners having that responsibility, which is the current city code requirement. So the slower timeline is the result of needing to reprioritize staff away from that project to new and more time-sensitive work. Specifically, that work has included the tree code amendments project that is required by City Council, and there's 3 forms of that, one of which we'll be talking about today. Also, stakeholder discussions on how street tree planting efforts are organized that you have been involved in. Sustainable future, that's the Parks and Recreation new funding strategy, including the recent operations levy that was successfully passed by voters. And also there have been some reductions in staff capacity due to COVID. So those are the reasons we're slower on that project. However, rest assured, it's still going. Any questions on that? Comments?
Greg and Bruce?
What are the staff reductions in urban forestry? And are they permanent or temporary?
Good question. Greg, my next item is about that. So if I could save it, I'll let you know in a minute. Sound good? And if you have follow-up questions, you can ask them then.
Okay.
Bruce? Bruce?
Jen, is there any interest in doing a pilot project for street tree maintenance rather than rolling into some sort of, or planning for some sort of full-scale program? The idea of a pilot may be able to discover some unanticipated challenges, and it also might be more affordable.
Yeah, that is included in the work we're doing. That was a specific request from City Council when we were there. So yeah, that's incorporated. And we tend to pilot almost everything we do that's new because it gives us the opportunity to learn a lot before we've invested time and energy in it. So thanks for that comment. Remember, please, the work we're doing now is really just putting together the information on what the options might be, what they would cost. In order to do a pilot, of course, we would need City Council to agree to fund that and to be actively considering a policy change.
All right.
I'll do the last one.
Sure.
Great. Okay, so this is related to Greg's question and also inspired by Bruce. Bruce recently sent along some ideas for the City Foresters report. And I'm addressing one of those now. I appreciate having those, and I'll encourage everyone else, if you have thoughts about content that you'd like to hear about, please do send them on. So specifically, Bruce had asked about the impacts of furloughs. As you know, the city kind of across the board in all bureaus had to institute furloughs in order to save on expenditures because revenue is down due to the COVID pandemic. So furloughs, for those of you who aren't familiar with them, these are unpaid required staff leave time. So basically folks aren't coming to work when they would be so that they don't need to be paid, and that reduces the expenditures to the city. So the impacts of the furloughs due to COVID on urban forestry's priority and work have mostly been to slow down or change the form of our responsibilities rather than stopping work or suspending activities. And nearly all of the forestry services have continued and have had to continue, but we've had to modify a lot to do the work with the limitations of COVID, just trying to prevent spread of the pandemic. So, you know, the 6-foot physical distancing, wearing masks, sanitizing, those sorts of things, as well as furloughs and other things that have been cost-saving measures, such as there's been a hiring freeze in effect for several months now. So anything that was a position that was vacant, we haven't been able to fill unless we've gotten a special exception. Greg, directly to your question, you know, we have not lost any positions because of the pandemic. We've just not been able to hire things that we had planned to hire because of that freeze to save on expenditures. And that's been the same across the whole city for all the bureaus, just as an attempt to manage the funds responsibly. So I'll give you an example of how COVID has impacted forestry services. And there are many. I'm just going to give you one for the sake of time that I think captures the essence of how things have changed since March for us and for what services people are getting from us. And that's our operations group. So these are the tree work people with chainsaws and do planting and those sorts of things. The tree emergency response system is part of the operations group, the 24/7 service for all public streets and city properties in the city, as well as the maintenance and planting and other things that I mentioned before. So all of those services and operations have continued. However, furloughs and the need to ride in separate vehicles because we can't have 6 feet of distance sitting in the same vehicle most of the time, special cleaning of equipment on a regular basis, delays in getting required trainings because of all the new COVID management protocols like commercial driver's licenses. And so having fewer heavy equipment operators, also team members needing time away to take care of, for example, their children because schools are closed or family members who need support. So those sorts of things and more like that have just slowed the work. And what that means for the operations group is we fall back to, as always, what are the priority services that need to happen and need to be focused on, and what things have to wait in these situations. And for that group, obviously the emergencies are always a top priority, and emergency response time has not been impacted by the pandemic and the outcomes of the pandemic because we've focused the resources there as we should. And planting has also not really been impacted because that's a high priority thing. You know, it takes us 3 years really to get to put a tree in a park or in a street for other bureaus because they have employed our services to do that. So, and we have the stock in a lot of cases. And of course, we also want to continue to grow the canopy rather than have that become something that gets marginalized. So where we've made up for the slower times is on the primarily non-emergency tree maintenance requests on city property. So things that are not urgent, that need to get done. And honestly, as you've heard before from me, we always have a very significant backlog of those, usually running around 6 months of work orders to address for the non-emergency category. And with the operations levy, we are very hopeful that that long-standing capacity issue will get addressed. So I want to ask Bruce, does that help? Is that the type of information we're looking for? Is there something else?
Bruce, you want to respond?
Yeah, I'm computer challenged today. I think that's good for a start, Jen. Thank you very much.
Great, you're welcome. And I've got 5 minutes left, Vivek. Aren't you proud of me? Anyone have any other questions or comments before I turn it back over to Vivek?
And Jen, just quickly, Claudio and you are going to kind of talk a little bit more about the last point you made. Is that right, about the operating levy?
Yes, that's right. So one of the agenda items today, Claudio will kick it off, Claudio, finance manager, but one of the specific roles of the Forestry Commission is to advise on budget. So that's what we're going to do today. And part of that will include the operations levy and what's happening with that.
Okay. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, Jen, I'd like to go back to, you talked a little bit about Streets 2035, and we heard during public comment from Doug Klotz about the 10-foot rule. I'm just wondering at this point if it makes sense for UFC to prepare some kind of letter to send to the Portland Water Bureau, explaining the importance of having street trees and how this policy impacts it, and asking that they work with your department to come up with a policy that really continues to allow street trees, something along those lines. That's certainly something we could start to work on, drafting something at the policy committee next Monday.
Mm-hmm.
If you think it's worthwhile, and everyone else too here.
Well, Daniel, thanks for bringing that up. And this is one of the reasons you're a great policy committee chair. I think that's an excellent idea. You could consider, do you want to wait until after you get more and comprehensive information? I just gave you the quick notes today, which we hope to do at the next meeting. However, expressing concern for the perceptions that the commission has of the impacts of that policy is always welcome, and I think would be helpful for the Water Bureau. This is an issue that we've been working on for almost 5 years now with the Water Bureau, and it's been fairly challenging. I will say too, one of our kind of principles throughout that time has been that to date, we have no instances of not requiring tree planting because of that Water Bureau policy. So for example, some of the situations Doug is looking at, all of those, to my knowledge to date, because that is our practice, so that should be correct, there are other reasons that those trees couldn't get planted. It wasn't just the 10-foot rule. Because as you all know, there are a whole lot of limitations on trees getting planted in right-of-way, some of them valid and some not, in my opinion. So getting back to your question, you feel free to write a letter anytime you like. Just consider after the next meeting, you may have more information.
Okay, because it seems like they're really kind of two related things. One is making sure that this is front and center in Streets 2035. And then of course, the other issue is between now and the time Streets 2035 get put in, making sure that, we're not going to have street trees get impacted. And so maybe we can talk, we can talk offline about this, but
yeah, let's do that. And it would actually be helpful for me to learn from you what are the specific interest areas and questions that you've heard the policy committee, so I can help Matt prepare for next month.
Okay, great, thanks.
You're welcome.
I had Greg and then Barbara.
Yeah, I've got two comments, and one is, I think in that letter, which I think would be a great idea, as we can remember from the recent zoning discussion, the Bureau did a lot of research. They checked acres and just all sorts of things. They checked on the tree sizes. They had a lot of background to make a more or less informed decision. I think asking the Water Bureau for some instances, or like a total number of instances where these pipes have been harmed, would just be, if there's zero, or if they can't provide any, it would not be unlike the electoral challenges we've all just witnessed. And then to backtrack a little bit, I know there's not been decisions yet on new urban forestry commissioners, but it's really pleasing to see so many that were interested and applied. And if there are some that, if the decision is being made or recommendations are made, but the commissioner hasn't yet made a decision, I just wonder if some of those people that are not going to become urban forestry commissioners might be redirected to these others, because they clearly have a tree interest. That's it for me.
Thanks, Greg. Barbara, and then Damon. You're muted. Uh-oh. Now we can't see you. I can see a very cute little baby, but I can't see you, Barbara. There we go. Still muted.
I got my buttons organized. Just to comment on Daniel's idea of writing a letter. I think, and Greg's comment about asking for instances, I think that it would be a good idea for us to be in front of that issue as opposed to being more responsive. And the reason for that is because once things get written down, we may be able to go on the way we've been doing it. But at some point, somebody is going to come along and wave, something that's written, at Jen or at, somebody in urban forestry. And I just think it would be good if we got in front of that issue with a letter.
Okay, if it's the same issue I'm thinking of, we've gotten in front of that a few times already. I think with testimony at council, and I think with Water Bureau who came to speak to us. But yeah,
I just think maybe we need to, keep standing up for it, and maybe eventually it'll get maybe a little higher on the radar.
Okay. Damon.
Just out of curiosity, does the Water Bureau also have a advisory commission like similar to the UFC? And should we be talking to them as well?
Not all part of the utility board? Yeah,
I believe that's true.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Damon. I've wondered a lot about this during the industrial and commercial zone exemption discussion. We collaborated more than I recall ever with the PSC Portland with the Planning Sustainability Commission, and that was really, I thought, part of the effectiveness of how we operated. So I really like the idea of thinking about how do we be more facile with the other commissions that are in the city to actually coordinate and triage some of these things that are coming up. So that's clever. I think we need to find a mechanism for being able to do that. Whether it's through Jen, Brian, and that kind of process, or how exactly that plays out, or whether it's issue by issue specific, like we did with the PSC.
Yeah, because it seems like Urban Forestry Commission to Water Bureau just falls on deaf ears.
Jen?
If I may, Damon, I wouldn't say that. I think in my experience, several years now. When residents and especially advisory committees express a concern to a bureau, there's an inclination to have to listen to it. There are various other ways also to connect on a particular concern.
Well, it just seems like with the water meters and whatnot, that didn't really go anywhere either.
Oh, they changed it.
Oh,
Title
did
21
they change
amendments,
that?
yeah, they did. They took out the requirement. It's now optional. So I reported on that last time.
It's now optional. Oh, that's right. Okay, but they still haven't looked into actually putting water meters out of the right of way.
They have not.
Or it doesn't seem like they're.
Yeah, that they haven't gone that far. We've had those conversations, and I intend that we'll keep working on that.
All right, I want to transition if that's a good set of points to consider for sure. I want to just transition quickly. So we have our guest Claudio here. I don't want to keep you waiting, Claudio. So we want to just have a quick little check-in with Megan about the Urban Forestry budget update. I'm sorry, with the Budget Advisory Committee update. Do you have any?
Yeah, I can keep it very succinct because honestly, Claudio can do a much better job of answering your questions. So I have been on the Budget Advisory Committee now. This is going into the second year. I will admit it's a little blurry because we were doing some additional meetings because as I imagine Claudio will speak to, because of COVID, you know, the city has been doing more supplemental budgets throughout the cycle. But thus far for this coming fiscal year, we've met twice, and our meeting was actually originally, our third meeting was scheduled for last week and has been rescheduled. So the main thing that I can say is we actually haven't gotten substantively into the budget itself. And one thing I respect about the process is, if folks aren't familiar, the first two meetings really have kind of, in some ways, are like tone setting, right? So we come together as a group to both understand what our role is, which we all as a commission also do at times, and understand the process, and then set our values for what's going to guide that process. And the second meeting, we kind of focused on what the budget programs are and the proposals, but also really to ensure that we apply an equity lens to that process. So that's really where we are. And my assumption is, which Claudio can speak, that we're going to get a bit more substantively into the budget moving forward and having some more conversations about what the levy means. And I will just identify, because I think it's helpful, that the parks, you know, staff does set priorities that we really discuss as the Budget Advisory Committee, and those have been summer 2021 programming, building the ramp, which I know Claudia will talk about, but that's kind of with the levy money, building a ramp into what that looks like moving forward to support the growth from the levy, and then just ensuring that we're always identifying critical failures in our operations. So that's it. I think we're going to dig in more, but I'm going to just hand it off to Claudio, who can answer all of these questions better than me.
Great, Megan. That was a great intro. Good morning, everybody. I'm Claudio Camposano. I'm the Finance, Property, and Technology Manager for the Bureau. I use he, him pronouns. As you're all aware, we are in deep budget mode right now. You know, I'm going to quickly review where we are in the process, and then give a high-level overview of those priorities and values that Megan discussed. And then I'm just going to hand it over to Jen and Brian, really, to discuss urban forestry specific issues. So Brian, do you want to bring up that first slide? Any luck? Awesome. All right. So we are working towards January 29th due date for our fiscal year 21-22 budget. The requested budget is going to include that first year of the operating levy that was passed in November. Our initial estimate is that we're going to receive about $45 million from tax collections in the first year. We are working with the city economist to refine that figure based on the most recent economic data. So we will certainly be adjusting that number as we move through the process. Due to the way that property tax collection works, that levy funding is only available to us in November of 2021. So in order to take some early actions, we indicated to council and voters prior to the election that we were going to need to do some short-term borrowing from our capital fund in order to fund those priorities that Megan mentioned, summer 2021, and other necessary investments to prepare to scale up with the levy and also to address those, any potential critical failures. So to that end, we are going to City Council in February for approval of a supplemental budget ordinance and interfund loan for this current fiscal year. Those early investments will extend, many of them will extend into the requested budget for the new fiscal year. The bulk of levy investments, however, and I want to emphasize this, will occur as part of the fall budget monitoring process in September. This timeline is really going to allow for more robust community engagement and internal PP&R discussions to inform our decision-making about that detailed use of levy resources and how we can really best achieve those desired outcomes. So in April, the mayor then proposes a budget using our requested budget for input. And in June, the entire city council passes the budget, which is going to start on July 1 of 2021 and goes through June 30th of 2022. Can you move to the next slide, please? All right. So as a bureau over the last 2 years, working with the late Commissioner Nick Fish and continuing with Mayor Wheeler as our commissioner, and then Commissioner Amanda Fritz, and now Commissioner Carmen Rubio, we've done a lot of work as a bureau to articulate the mismatch between community needs and the resources we have to deliver on those. Now, with the addition of the levy, we're creating that plan to optimize the use of resources that the bureau receives, and that's whether it's general fund, levy, other funding sources. And so, as I mentioned, this work is really going to continue through that fall process and beyond. So a priority for our work is really to center community voices, specifically BIPOC, refugee, and immigrant communities, really to understand how we might redefine our services. So cost is not a barrier for our public-facing programming, and our service offerings become more equitable in terms of both their access and content. So for 21-22 requested budget, we've continued to use the values of equity, safety, maintenance, and financial sustainability. And really, those were established with our budget advisory committee 2 years ago during that budget crisis. And they've really served us well as a guide star for decision making, although I think it's probably time to start revisiting them. We've done a little bit of that work with this BAC. So excited to keep on refining that as we grow into our new resources. So as I mentioned, the levy resources, they're going to be used this early round to deliver on the promises that we made to the community for summer 2021 programming. But we're also focused on building that organizational ramp so that we have the organizational infrastructure in place to grow our services to the community and address organizational weaknesses. So things that are going to you'd see in that ramp, they include building the capacity to actually hire and onboard a substantial number of new staff. So that's in workforce, that's in supervision, also acquiring the space and equipment for them to be able to do their jobs when they do come on board, developing technology that'll leverage that new staff capacity. So those are some of the types of things that we'll be seeing in the ramp. And I know Jen and Brian might be talking about sort of urban forestry specific items. So as some of you might know, the central budget guidance issued by the mayor included a significant general fund reduction. His guidance directed all bureaus with more than 30 employees, and we certainly have more than 30 employees, as well as also the city budget office, they're taking a reduction as well, to take a 5% reduction on their general fund allocation. For our bureau, a 5% general fund reduction is about $3.7 million. Portland Parks and Recreation will not be making cuts while we are ramping up with levy funds. So what this means is that we will be shifting some of our operations from general fund to the levy. While this won't have any immediate impact on operations, I do want to note that it will impact the amount of the levy available for enhanced services to the public over the life of that levy. So that's a really important flag for folks. But I will also note that in July, when council asked about whether they would try and quote, balance the city's general fund on the levy, they said no, but they did give the caveat that if citywide reductions were necessary, as they are now, our general fund allocation would be cut in step with other general fund bureaus. So that's what we're seeing as part of this budget process. Can you move to the next slide? Before I hand it over to Jen, just to talk about urban forestry specific items, you know, I wanted to quickly remind folks about the allowable uses of the levy. And I think you'll recognize that they're considerably broad, and that is intentionally so. You know, so this is the summary language from the ballot language. And I'm just gonna, if you can move on, Brian, I just wanna quickly pop up some of the detail from that ballot language. So we currently receive about $74 million in general fund discretionary resources. With a levy that's gonna add roughly $45 million in additional resources, that's really an order of magnitude increase, and it's really critical to meeting sort of the broad service needs of our community. So that's, you know, hence you see, you know, really everything that we do as a bureau is largely covered here minus capital. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jen, and then we can probably take any questions after that.
Thanks. Claudio, I know that you have to leave a little bit earlier. Well, you know what, we'll do it the way we thought, and hopefully mine will go quickly enough that we'll be able to both field questions. So,
tell you what, I will give you a holler when I've got a couple of things that I need to do before my 11 o'clock. So I'll give you a holler if I'm getting a little nervous, and we can jump in with questions for me, but I'd love to be part of the conversation.
Excellent, thank you. And yeah, holler loudly. I'm working off one screen, which you know what that's
All right.
Okay, Brian, if you could bring up the forestry presentation, great. Thank you. Okay, I'm building on the overarching setting and information that you just got from Claudio, going specifically to what we're planning on in urban forestry in developing the fiscal year 21-22 budget. And as a reminder, that is the budget that would start July 1st and run through the next July 1st in 2022. And also as a reminder, we're presenting this to you today so that you have the opportunity to advise on your perspectives of what the information we're sharing with you and whether we've hit it or we should think of other things. So please be ready to do that at the end. Next slide, please, Brian. Okay, this is many of these slides, I should say, you have seen before. And here's the reason for that. Our priorities in terms of budget have not changed in big ways for some time now. We've been kind of routinely under capacity for the responsibilities that we are required to deliver according to the tree code, as well as need to deliver as the urban forest managers for the city. And so our priorities haven't changed a lot. It's addressing those things. Here you see in this graphic, the different buckets that we organize our work into. All of these come together to comprise urban forest management. And all of them are guided by the city's vision for its urban forest infrastructure, which is the Urban Forest Management Plan. Great, we can go to the next slide. Okay. So in terms of where we're focusing for resource needs, building capacity, we have these umbrella categories here. Capacity and forest infrastructure. Capacity is really just, in simple terms, having enough people to do the work. And forest infrastructure is elevating the role of trees in the city, having them become, the urban forest become every bit as an essential asset to Portlanders and to the city bureaus as are maybe sewer pipes and a transportation network and those sorts of things. So within capacity, here are our priority challenges in the bullets here. Workload, span of control. What that means is right now we have in all of our work units, one manager and no supervisors, and they often have as many as 23 staff that they're responsible for supporting and leading. And that is the span of control that is untenable, really. It's far too much for one person to have to work on at that level with so many folks. So one of our goals continues to be getting more resources to help with that supervisory work. Another of the goals for capacity is city tree maintenance. As you all know, we do not proactively maintain trees on on parks properties where the most of the public trees in the city reside. So that's something we're hoping to change. And also another example of where we haven't had capacity and an area we're looking to change starting this year with the levy ramp up is code compliance. And the example, the poster child that we've given for some time now is we know that around 2,000 trees that are required to be planted by the permits that Urban Forestry has issued are not getting planted because we are not able to follow up on those. We look at Title 11 implementation as a work in progress, and we have not implemented all parts of it. And this is one of those areas. I'll go a little quicker. Forest infrastructure. We're looking at resourcing our capacity to be present and not be at the little kids table, as somebody put it recently, which is accurate, when it comes to working with other bureaus and other interests in the city, so that the urban forest is always well represented and presented. And that includes our components of our asset management and the Title 11 amendments, being able to do those. We've wanted to do those, for example, for many years, but have not had resource to do it. And other city policies that are important, as well as code. Before I move on, I wanted to ask Brian, do you have anything you'd want to mention here that I've missed?
No, I think that covers all of it. Yep.
Okay, great, thanks. Brian wears many hats, as you all know. One of those is he is our budget guru. He builds our budget every year, which is a Herculean task. So that's why I'm going to be asking him to jump in whenever possible or needed. Can you switch slides? One of our focus areas that we are hoping to resource with the new fiscal year budget is growing a more equitable forest. And that's really ramping up tree planting efforts. That covers a variety of different locations and types of planting in rights of way, parks and natural areas, city properties, and private and other properties are all part of a strategic approach to increasing canopy in the city. And the investment that we're putting in there comes from a number of different resources, ideally. By city funds that you see here in the investment line, we mean the general fund allocation that is given to our division, as well as what we call interagency work or interagency agreements. So we're the city's arborists, and what that means is other bureaus will hire us basically to do tree work for them, including planting. For example, if Bureau of Transportation has a street improvement project and we've successfully been able to require tree planting on that project, it might be our arborists who go and do that work. And then sustainable future, the operations levy is one part of that, as Claudio just put out there. That's also an important new funding source, hopefully even more so in the future. And we have not been in a position to really pursue grants, but with more resource and capacity, we will be including that as an essential part of the investment. And then outcomes, we always want to incorporate that and have you know that this is important to us. We're always focused on collecting good data, doing competent objective analyses, being transparent with our data and the outputs of those data. And of course, we're focused on priority neighborhoods where mostly BIPOC, low income, and communities of color, immigrants and refugees live who are underserved by trees. And of course, we're focused as well on the standard needs of good urban forest management, such as species diversity, favoring large form trees, and focusing as best we can on the impacts of climate crisis. Anything to add there, Brian? If not, you can move on. So specific requests that Urban Forestry has presented to our Bureau as part of the operations levy directly support the priorities I just walked through for you. And those in detail, more detail, are the following. The first and foremost is some asset management software That's been lacking since before I came to work at Urban Forestry, which is almost 9 years now. We just need a good system to collect those data and be able to run reports and analyze data, and also handle our workflow. When a request comes in, we need to be able to use software to track it to make sure it's fulfilled. Currently, for example, our emergency tree services operate primarily off of paper. So we want that to change, obviously. As I mentioned before, one of the priorities in the short term is relieving the span of control. So more staff to help support and lead the staff who are doing the frontline work. Park tree maintenance and emergency response. So this is proactive park tree maintenance. We're building towards that because that was a component of the operations levy. So that's great news that we're able to start focusing on that sometime soon, and also increasing the tree planting. Right now, because it's levy ramp up, we're really focused on building the infrastructure we need to utilize the levy funds of the future most effectively. So we don't expect to see a lot of changes in our outcomes in the coming fiscal year, but we're laying the foundation so that we will see those changes in the years that follow. Brian, anything to add there?
I think just to make sure that everyone is tracking that this is really detailing the immediate type of positions we'll be requesting next month. So Claudio mentioned a inter-fund loan borrowing against the levy that'll come on in the fall. So this is really about meeting these sort of priority, long-standing needs that really fill some gaps in our day-to-day operations. But as Jen mentioned, will help position us for some pretty significant staff hiring starting in the fall.
Exactly. Right. And as Claudio mentioned, there were 3 goals for what we're calling the levy ramp up that we're hoping to get permission from council to do in February. And 2 of those goals apply directly to this list of priorities from Urban Forestry. One of those is avoiding critical failures. And the other one is creating the infrastructure that enables us to best use the levy resources going forward. The third of those, if you recall, was about summer programs. And that's not so much of a focal area for Urban Forestry. Our summer programs will continue as they have in the past for this coming summer. That one's really about recreation, which has much bigger hurdles to resolve for this summer. Can we go to the next one, Brian? Next and last. So a little bit of information about the budget currently, what we're seeing in terms of revenue and expenditures and those things. This is something we always, of course, have to manage and track, and plays into what we need to address in future budgets. So our program revenue, primarily this is tree permit application fees, continues to be depressed compared to pre-COVID. And that is a function of the pandemic and the economic downturn that's happening in the whole country. We have also, to make up for that downturn, have had to reduce costs where possible, and non-personnel, meaning we're not laying anyone off. We try to do that very last, if ever. Instead, it's things like reducing travel budgets for training, which fortunately aren't really applicable during COVID anyway. So we always look for those opportunities when there's quote unquote a hole to fill, rather than go to people. We don't have enough of those to start with, and they're an important asset for all of us to manage the forest. And as Claudio mentioned, all the bureaus are being asked to take a 5% cut. However, in parks, that would be heading in the wrong direction when we've just successfully gotten the operations levy from Portland voters. So we're holding steady as best we can until we can have the levy funds to make up for what reductions would be needed. Anything to add on that, Brian?
No, I think that covers it. And I saw a few hands pop up during the presentation, and I know Claudio only has a little bit more time, so I'll make sure we can get to questions.
I think we have him till 11, so I think we have lots of time. Yeah, I have only one screen, so I can't see all's hands while I'm talking, but now I can. So it's back to Vivek.
Thank you, Claudio. Thank you, Jen. That was really That was really stimulating. I started thinking about lots of things, but I want to open it up to commissioners. What do you have for Claudio clarification or Jen? This is a rare window into the interworkings of budget in forestry and in parks more generally. So, Bruce, mute button.
All right, my question is, Jen, do you feel like we are putting enough urban forestry resources into working to protect existing trees that will provide climate benefits over the next 20 years, as opposed to planting trees that will provide environmental benefits 20 years from now?
Thanks for that question, Bruce. And it is clear that you know a lot about trees and the urban forest. Overall, separate from this budget process, I would say no, we are not as a city putting enough resource into tree protection. So much of the discussion and focus, including for the Forestry Commission, has been really on planting, which of course is important. And I think in the vernacular of our times, with everyone worried about climate crisis and identifying finally that trees are a solution to that, there's a lot of focus on adding but not keeping. So if I look at how much money is spent on planting as opposed to maintenance, the city spends a lot more on planting than maintenance right now. In regards to this budget and the levy is a key opportunity and sustainable future to change that scenario. And our goal is to continue to plant and increase planting while also getting our maintenance up to where it needs to be. And you'll remember one of the bullets on there was about park tree maintenance. You know, that's 1.2 million trees. By far, most of the public trees in the city are on park property. And the fact that the operations levy will enable us to build proactive maintenance for those trees is a great start on changing that paradigm.
Greg.
I mean, there's lots of things of great interest here, but I am really intrigued by the tree asset management software, because even when I was working in the Bureau, this was a need, and the Bureau has come quite a long way on other asset management and has people dedicated to that. But so I have sort of a twofold question. The first is there software available? Or would there be this whole research phase and a lot of delay? And then second is the park tree inventory data transferable to something like that? I mean, could it actually hit the ground running? Knowing that how we untrained arborists categorize those trees as, you know, good, fair, poor is not professional, but it certainly gives we're good on dead.
Good, because if you didn't get that one, I don't know. No. Yeah, good questions, Greg. Yes, the GIS data we have, almost all competent software systems today that are around asset management address and incorporate ArcGIS, so that will be transferable. And whatever program we end up with, that'll be a requirement. Your first question, is there software out there available, so-called off the shelf? There are softwares out there, at least a couple I know of, that are built to do tree asset management. The challenge for us, however, is that we don't work in a vacuum. Of course, we actually need to be interfacing with, for example, what's called Amanda 7, the city's permitting database that's run by BDS, and also the rest of parks, right? Because parks has, for example, plumbers who are out doing plumbing work on those assets while we are doing tree work on tree assets. In an ideal world, we need those things to at least talk to each other. Claudia, would you add anything to that?
No, I think that about gets it. And, you know, just to give a window into a little bit of what else is going on throughout the Bureau, you know, one of the areas where we also need to be ramping up is in areas of technology. And specifically, you know, currently the Bureau has 2 people in central technology, and they both spend almost all of their time doing, you know, sort of help desk type functions for folks, you know, with broken laptops, or they need new phones, and so, you know, one of the things that we recognize is going to be critical is sort of developing a more mature technology infrastructure. And so one of the areas where we've been, where we've had challenges is in implementing medium to large size projects. And so we're going to be bringing on a project manager specifically for some initial high priority projects, including the Bureau's replacement of our work order system and moving towards a more robust asset management system that may or may not be integrated with the tree system. But we are going to be looking at whether one system can manage them all, or if not, we don't want to fit a square peg into a round hole and recognize that we want to move quickly to get the systems in place that folks need. So getting that project management support is another part of, is sort of sitting in another part of the budget, but to really be able to accelerate those projects.
Thanks, Claudio. I'll add briefly, when it comes to having good performance metrics that we can show how our programs are doing, what the outcomes are, and being accountable for the funds that Portland residents have graciously given us to use well, we are really limited when we don't have good software. So that's why I always put that on the top of that list, even though we have plenty of staff needs too.
I want to go to Daniel and then Damon, though. Just want to interject on the software piece really quickly. If you could think, if anyone in your staff could think about the implications on distributional and analytical equity issues that come up with software, because it can often be considered just an agnostic tool when we know it's not. So it's one of those things that I think, unless you're thinking about the ways in which the software can further underscore existing inequities, then that's something to really question in the software system you ultimately end up with. Just a little side note for consideration. Daniel?
Yeah, thank you. Well, first of all, Jen, just wanted to acknowledge this is big. You've got a big task ahead. I know that huge increases in budget can be as disruptive as huge decreases in budget for very different reasons. One issue that's been on our radar for the commission for many years, but for a while now has been on the back burner related to equity, which you mentioned that quite a few of the resources of the levy were going to address equity issues. And that is the issue of how to fund street trees in historically underserved neighborhoods where the residents simply don't have the funding, personal funding to be able to pay. I'm wondering if any of the funding here is going to be offered for planting and possibly maintenance in some of those neighborhoods. I mean, we all know that a permanent source of funding is not there, but I'm just wondering, since equity is such a big issue, and this is an issue that touches the whole street, the whole city canopy and equity issues, can any of this money be used to actually pay for planting and maintaining trees in underserved neighborhoods?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question, Daniel. And it can be used for that. And we are doing that when I talk about spans of control, and that component also about wanting to improve and increase planting. Some of the kind of structural ramp up levy requests are directly around that. So in the short term, I don't expect us to be, for example, using levy funds to pay for more tree stock, but we're getting the staff that can figure out how and run planting programs, and also really strategically look at how best to use our funds. There are, as I said in one of the slides, there are a lot of other funding sources for tree planting that don't exist for example, proactive tree maintenance on park trees, and the levy can do that. So we'll be looking at that as well. But the short answer to your question is yes, we could do that. Brian, do you have any additions to that, especially if I've crossed the line on capital and that kind of thing?
No, I think that's right on. I think the only thing I'll add is that the asset management software that we've been talking about, that's also one of the functions that we've identified, and that we've identified a need for staff who can manage and utilize that software as a tool for identifying potential street tree planting locations. When we talk about the sort of scale of planting that we need to get to over the next few years, having that tool is going to be a significant part of that.
So you mentioned tree stock, so that could not be used with the levy funds. But what about things like contracts to actually do the planting in some of these areas?
Yeah, we can use it for that. We are doing that currently. And as I said, right now, our focus is we don't even have the people to look at what more contracting or different contracting or what is our strategy for ODOT owned property. So that's our starting place now for the levy funds. However, when we have that people infrastructure in place, then we will be looking strategically across the whole bandwidth of options for how best to plant using the resources we have.
Okay, so it looks like there are some pathways for getting some trees into some of these neighborhoods where people don't necessarily have the funding to get the trees in themselves. Even if it's not there now, there is a pathway, because we also have, you know, the trust funds, street tree trust funds.
Right, and that's a great illustration. We're doing what you're talking about right now, like literally today. People are out there planting street trees, contractors that are working with us. And that's all funded by the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund. And the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund is narrowly defined how we can use it. So it is likely to always be focused on as a planting resource. And now, fortunately, we have this whole new resource, the operations levy. So we're working on getting the staff in place to do the strategic thinking about how best to use the various funds to achieve the outcomes that we all want. So the simple answer to your question is yes, the operations levy can be used for tree planting, and we may end up doing more of that. Right now, we're focused on using the Tree Planting and Preservation Fund and creating the infrastructure so that we can expand our planting beyond that fund, potentially using operations levy.
Hey, Damon.
Great. Just a couple points. Jen, I'm sure you know about the program that ODF is having for the free subscription to Tree Plotter for using their that asset management platform. I don't know if that would be an appropriate one, but I wanted to make sure that that information was out there. The other thing is that we are one of the contractors doing that planting for urban forestry. And the program at this point is an opt-out program where, you know, urban forestry contacts the homeowners, says we're going to be planting a tree, let us know if you don't want it. And I know that even at the time of planting, it's a daily occurrence, and we're talking, you know, 10, you know, one crew might be doing 10 to 15 trees a day. It's a daily occurrence that it seems like one homeowner, you know, just comes out and is like, oh, I didn't, you know, pay any attention to any of the stuff that you guys sent me. I don't want this tree in my yard or in my planting strip. And one of the things I've been speaking to the commission about for a while now is the need for a marketing plan for trees and to elevate the stature of trees in our citizens' minds. And I'm just hoping, I didn't see it anywhere on the in the presentation. I'm hoping that again we can start to capture the hearts and minds of our residents in City of Portland and make having a tree on their street a more acceptable thing.
Thank you.
Brian, thanks, Damon. Megan?
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to just share, and again, Claudio can always speak better to this, but as we think about the operating levy, is thinking about that as a 5-year operating levy. And I think that's just an important context as well, which is why certain, I think, wish items, and there's more background context, right? Like why taking on permanent street tree maintenance is not in it. And there's the whole process about how it didn't actually pull as well as we would have wanted. So I just think as we talk about it, it's not as if we suddenly have all of this money moving forward permanently. And part of what is happening in the parks budgeting process is coming up with additional long-term solutions for continuing increased budgeting. So just to think about that as we talk about what is a reality moving forward.
Yeah, but just jumping in, Megan, thank you for that. I think that's a really good point. And so just to be clear, it is a 5-year levy, but we have not been bashful about saying that we have long-term ongoing needs that we're looking to solve, and that the levy was really a necessary starting point. Appreciation to Vivek for being involved in our revenue task force last year, 2 years ago. God, time can't handle it. It doesn't make any sense to me anymore. But we considered several other options, many of which are still on the table, and a number of which are permanent. So that sustainable future effort continues. And is going to, it's going to continue to move into other development efforts as we move forward. So thank you for raising that, Megan.
This is probably way out in left field, but since we have a moment of your time, I'm just curious, like how public financing works. We were talking about these pilot projects as being part of the way the city works, and that you conduct a pilot project and then you evaluate that, and you can see the extent to which a 5-year time-based levy like this almost seems like it lends itself to opportunities for assessing the extent to which a maintenance program or something else could or couldn't work. And is that in the bounds of what you're thinking, or is that just off the table?
No, 100%. I mean, I think that regardless of the pilot concept, I mean, think of it as a test at accountability. We've got 5 years to show the public that we deserve to be re-upped when the time comes. So one of the big areas of investment, particularly as part of the ramp up, is to build some of. We talked a little bit about technology. We talked a little bit about GIS. But one thing that that those are all a part of is developing a better infrastructure for measuring accountability. And so we are looking to not just the technology, but also systems and processes for identifying outcomes, determining what data we need to measure those, and making sure that we're establishing baselines and internal processes to manage towards those. I would be remiss to say that we have to be super careful. I mean, outcomes are performance management has been around for a long, long time. I think that one of, I forget exactly how they say it, but basically you are what you measure. You can be, if you're measuring, certain things, you can easily perpetuate a white supremacy culture. So I think that making sure that we are being very, very aware of those things that we are choosing to measure and track towards and be accountable to is going to be a really, really critical part of our efforts to become an anti-racist bureau.
Great, thank you. Damon, and then
yeah, I was just going back to my earlier comments. I didn't ask directly, I guess, Jen. Is there any move towards marketing trees to the citizenry?
Yes, absolutely. It's not in the current budget directly. That's why you didn't see it in there. But again, we're at a place where we're just trying to get the people power in place to do things like, let's get that marketing and communication strategy going. You'll be happy to know our new communications manager, his name is Tim Collier. He's actually not new. He's been with us probably almost 8 months now, but this is near and dear to his heart as well, for the whole Bureau, as well as trees, the importance of trees, growing people's affinity and support for trees.
Mm-hmm. Would this levy be something where we could use some of that money to pay professional marketing firms to help us develop something?
Yeah, no, not well, I shouldn't say that, not in the current budget cycle. Because again, at this point, we don't have the staff resource, or we would have been doing it already, to hire and work with consultants. But over the next 5 years, certainly that could be part of that scenario. And I'm hopeful that we'll really be able to rely on the Parks Bureau's communications group with Tim at the helm to lead that work as the experts in that, but also so that Parks is communicating that it is the Tree Infrastructure Bureau and leading with that message through all its capacities routinely, as Parks has really done well in terms of recreation and community centers in the past, but maybe hasn't focused on as much when it comes to urban forest infrastructure.
Yeah, because I could see that making the levy a second go around, in 5 years, making that levy a lot more palatable if it was known that, hey, this is paying for trees.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know that, Megan, thank you for bringing that up about the street tree policy change, and that didn't poll well. That is a discussion we've had internally. It certainly doesn't mean that we're not going to do anything about our street tree issue. Rather, it means we need to do some communication and marketing in order to help people understand why those are important, and that really, if we change the policy, it's going to be a lot less expensive for them to deal with street trees going forward. So there's an illustration that we're on the same page there. It just won't be in this directly in this fiscal year cycle.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
Bruce?
Recently, I've been thinking about my own neighborhood and tree planting and some of the challenges in it. And I wondered if in the Urban Forestry's tree planting outreach, do you feel like you're engaging with various neighborhood groups to get buy-in and participation in the planting, or is it more a citywide, okay, we're going to focus on street tree planting? How much engagement is there with local citizens? I know when the workforce that Angie chaired back in 2014, there were very diverse communities represented, but I wondered now, when the decision is made to plant in some East Portland neighborhood, how much engagement is there prior to the deciding what kind of planting will be done with that community or organizations within that community? And should that be a budget priority?
Thank you, Bruce. It is a budget priority. So that's a level of detail within what I gave you before about wanting to advance and improve and expand planting. So some of the resource that we're looking to have, people that we're looking to be able to hire, are going to focus specifically on that, is how can we work more with local community groups and really just support and empower them to, we can be the technical knowledge, we need to be the technical knowledge. And obviously we can address the regulatory needs, but in an ideal world, we would have a lot more partners and organizations that are communities of color who want to do planting and are working in their community to do the marketing and messaging that Damon is talking about with us or instead of us, as well as do that planting work. So that is indeed part of it. And again, we're at that building infrastructure stage, so it's not explicit, but we're trying to get to the place where we're able to do that. We haven't really had the capacity to do that in the past.
And a Hail Mary here with urban forestry management plan possibility.
Stay tuned for the next agenda item. Dun, dun, dun.
Oh yeah, right. Oh, right. Let me go back to that. Well, good. Anything else coming up? Any folks who haven't spoken have any questions for Claudio before he goes? Barbara?
Can I just make one comment? While we've been talking about marketing the value of trees and all that, and of course there's property values and everything. what keeps going through my mind is the Humane Society, the Oregon Humane Society, you know, and of course they have billboards and all that kind of stuff, which we can't do, but they came up with this campaign. I think it's End Petlessness. And I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they did it internally or if they hired somebody to do it, but we all tend to be better at natural resource things than at marketing, because that's how we got where we are. But I keep wondering, you know, like End Petlessness seems to be, you know, doing really well. I mean, maybe I would call, I'm willing to call the Humane Society and see if I can't ask them how they did this campaign, if anybody wants me to do that, because I'm interested in how they got to be so good at it, because adopting pets was maybe not the biggest thing on everybody's radar screen.
And treelessness, is that what you're saying?
Well, I mean, that's not what I had in mind, but it's very concise. It's very simple. End Petlessness, and you know, end treelessness might work. I'm not sure. You know, got trees? I don't know, but
got a freebie.
What was that?
Trees are cool. I said I've got a freebie. Trees are cool.
Yeah, I don't know if that would resonate quite as much, but
in the summer it does.
Well, that's true. In the summer it does. You know, I just think that this is going to be a little bit out of the box in getting some people to think about trees as a good thing.
Yeah, someone who adopted a pandemic puppy, I'll tell you that probably somehow subliminally worked on me. So appreciate that, Barbara.
Yeah, and this is like even before COVID, you know, where, you know, puppy adoptions and kitty adoptions have gone way up, but you know, still somehow the Humane Society got good at this, and I'm not sure how.
Mm-hmm. Very good. Thanks, Claudio, for your insights, input, and general scope of description. It's a lot of work, as Daniel was saying earlier. This is an enormous effort 2 years ago when we started exploring that concept, and now we're actually seeing it play out, and it's kind of exciting to be watching the arc really come to fruition here.
Yeah, I'm going to say that I am happily overwhelmed, you know, and you know, it's better than the overwhelmed that I felt 2 years ago. So, so we're in, you know, it's an exciting problem to have. We're excited to be working with you guys, and it's a pleasure to drop in. So please feel, you know, look forward to coming again.
All right, thank you. We hope to invite. All right. We hope you can come back and visit us sometime.
Thanks
so much. Take care.
Bye. All right, let's move into the, I don't know, we don't have a break scheduled in here, so I'm gonna kind of just suggest if you have a body break just to, you know, do your thing, we'll be here. We do have a very tantalizing topic coming up here of Title 11 amendments that Jen is going to help us think through. And I know we've been talking about this, and I want to save a little bit of time towards the end again for talking about future and what you'd like to see on the agendas for 2021. But let me turn it. Jen, are you good with jumping into this Title 11 amendment discussion?
Sure, absolutely. Can you tell me, Vivek or Brian, how much time do I have? So
we set aside about 25 minutes. But I mean, yeah, 25 minutes is what we set aside.
Great, thank you. Okay, so I'll frame this again for you all. We're bringing this to give you information, but also we'd like advice, right? So be thinking about what your thoughts are, and I would ask you to share them. I'll run through this and then we'll have plenty of time for discussion. So this is a really good follow-up from the previous conversation about budget and new resources coming from the operations levy, and hopefully much longer than the 5 years as part of the larger Sustainable Future project. So originally we were tasked by City Council with 3 different code amendment projects. 2 of those got merged together and have been completed, and those new requirements are already up and running. They're being implemented as we speak, which is a fantastic achievement. We have this 3rd one left, And that was inspired by Commissioner Fritz coming back to council with a high-level scope of work for doing more code amendments, more comprehensive Title 11 tree code amendments. Well, since that directive came, we have had the operations levy succeed, and we have new resources. And so we've reframed that directive, and that's what you're going to hear today is what we're thinking about it. Let's see. So a reminder, as per the city's code, the tree code, that set of regulations is an implementation tool for the urban forest management plan. Again, the forest management plan, as I said in the previous presentation, is the city's guiding visionary document for what our urban forest infrastructure and tree assets should be and what they should be achieving for Portlanders. And that management plan has a framework of goals, policies, and actions to guide city management activities and decisions in the short and long term. And it's supposed to be reviewed and updated at least every 10 years. That is specified in the tree code. The most recent update of the forest management plan was in 2004. So as I think you all are painfully aware, it is very outdated. And I'll highlight some of the ways it's outdated in particular that we would never see were we to do it today. One, it's fairly weak when it comes to equity in tree services and recognizing the remarkable disparity in tree services in the city. And also it is silent when it comes to the climate crisis. 2004 in climate terms was a long while ago, and it wasn't as much of a known need. So we have plenty of reason to want to update that forest management plan, however, have not had the resources to do it, as I think you also know. Well, now we have resources. At present, we're not staffed to update the forest management plan. And this relates directly to the conversation we just had with Claudio, where we are now moving into this ramp up phase where the operations levy, we don't have those resources yet and won't till the fall. So we're going to go to council next month and basically ask them to give us our cash advance so we can get moving on putting infrastructure in place to use the levy as best we can going forward. And in the meantime, we have wanted to and needed to do code amendments and update the forest management plan for years. So it is well overdue, and it is a frustration for every one of our team in urban forestry, and I know it frustrates you. So what we've come up with is, rather than going to council about, just a high-level scope of work, what we've morphed that into is really a larger project that is updating the forest management plan and identifying and implementing tree code amendments. So it's instead of a one step, it's going to be 3 steps. And instead of it being March, which was the due date, the end of March for this high level scope of work, it'll occur over a period of time. So in the short term, what we are thinking is that with existing staff resources, so we, as I said before, we won't be able to really add staff in the short term. But with existing staff resources, our plan would be to come back to council probably around this time next winter, or maybe it would be February or March, and have a tune-up, a Title 11 tune-up project. And those would be really more technical, non-controversial amendments that, although they are technical and relatively simple, are really important for improving the status of trees and the ability of urban forestry to protect trees and manage them better. And it's things like having full lien authority, which is a key enforcement tool for any of the bureaus. And Water Bureau, for example, they have that authority in their code. Somehow it was missed in Title 11, and it's not quite correct. Many of these tune-up things actually should have been covered in one of the BPS projects, Recap 8, a while ago, but unfortunately got omitted. So using existing resources, we'd want to do that work. And then as we are ramping up from the levy, so hiring on people, including policy staff who could lead a forest management plan update, the next step would be working together on updating the forest management plan and using that, and using the the public outreach time and all the stakeholder involvement and engagement to inform the forest management plan update, as well as inform further and larger tree code amendments. And we see that that would take significant project, and we have a lot of need for it to go well and be very inclusive of many stakeholders, and a well-designed project with ample opportunities for folks to weigh in, and there'll be discussion with the commission and others. So what we anticipate is we would start working on that project soon after the tune-up that would be delivered next early spring or late winter. So that summer, so next summer, not this coming one, but 2022, we'd be looking at really getting going on the forest management plan with an eye to that update informing the code amendments that would come after it. We do anticipate that the forest management plan, because it is an important and significant piece of work with a lot of details to get right, that it could take as much as 2 years to do that work. So we are to go back to council soon with this. Remember, the original task was this high-level scope of work. Our thinking at present is we will go back to council with this larger approach that really addresses more of the needs and puts them in the right order, rather than what we were originally tasked to do, which was mostly an effort just to make sure that code amendments did not fall off the radar. And we would plan to do that also, probably not by the end of March, but probably within the next couple months. So maybe by May or something of that nature. I'm going to ask Brian if he would like to add anything to that or clarify anything before we open it up for discussion.
Yeah, I think the only clarification, just in case it came across incorrectly, is when we mentioned bringing those amendments sort of this time next year, that would be the sort of conclusion of that project. That's when those amendments would go to City Council for their approval. The actual work on that would probably start June or July of this year. So just to clarify what the timeline is, and essentially that sort of tune-up project would run while we're staffing up with not just policy positions, but having supervisor positions in place so that Jen, Casey, Angie, the managers can have capacity to work on these sort of higher level policy decisions as well. So that's where the sort of sequence of the project that we have in mind is.
Great, thank you for that important clarification. Okay, at this point, I would love to hear your feedback, comments, questions.
Right, start with Bruce.
So does that mean when the Bureau of Development Services, they got a city council mandate to present by the end of March 31st, they're going to tell city council, or they'll make arrangements ahead of time that they're not going to come to them then, they'll come later?
I'm not following you in terms of Bureau of Development Services. What do you mean there?
I think I'll just clarify that, yeah, Bruce, the directive in that council resolution was to Parks and Urban Forestry to bring back, it wasn't to BDS. So BDS was the lead on the first two.
So then the March 31st is not in play then, is that correct?
It would probably be more like May, just to address, remember they wanted that high level scope of work for how we might at some point do future amendments. Our plan though is to do better than that. It's not to go to council and say, oh, we'll do these at some point. It's to elevate the need to council and tell them we are now, because of the levy funding, ready resource-wise to update the forest management plan and have that inform the more substantive amendments as it's intended to do. So putting it in the right order. And at the same time, we'll be telling them, and here is this near-term, simpler tune-up project that we'll also be doing. So it's going to replace the whole idea, lesser, smaller idea of presenting just a high-level scope of work for amendments.
Okay.
It's all very exciting, Jen, Brian. Just a quick question before I get to Daniel are there shops out there that have really found a way to bring DEI issues into urban forestry management plans? Like, are there any urban forestry management plans that, for example, have the ability to be able to do the kinds of things that we've found to be best practices in urban forestry with the software that you're talking about, with a lot of the other, and yet have a backbone of some of these historic inequities that have played out and challenges that we are currently not in the plan?
Yeah, great question. And there are many forest management plan type things out there for other American cities and Canadian cities and cities across the world that are more advanced, inclusive than the one that we have in Portland right now. Mostly, I think, due to the virtue of time. Ours is just old, and it's way old. And others have done theirs since then, and they've incorporated a lot of the field of urban forestry and diversity, equity, inclusion, and climate into those better than our current plan. But your question was really, are there any templates that kind of have it down?
And organizations.
Yeah, and organizations, yeah. So my answer to that is going to be two things. One, something Brian said before about improving our span of control so that we can all do our work. I and my management team and any of my other staff have literally put in the parking lot, spending time on what we might learn from others to have a really great forest management plan update. We've had to do that because the priority for us is these other things that have to happen every day. That's why I keep coming to you folks and saying we need resources to update the forest management plan. So that work hasn't been done yet. But because this is what I do every day and our team does every day, I'm comfortable saying that I don't think anyone's really cracked that nut entirely yet. I think that just viewing trees in cities as essential infrastructure and relating the racist patterns of our government in the past to how trees are distributed and who they are and are not serving. That's a relatively new concept that really your research and the article that hit the Times and went everywhere else, it really moved that conversation forward, and nothing had before that. So I think it's such a new and needed area that the entire urban forestry community is still learning. And we'll be in a position to hopefully help all cities who are watching use some of the things that we'll be able to learn and develop in improving their plans too.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just wondering about Davey and these other groups that have been around for a long time and whether they're pivoting as I guess as profoundly as we might want.
Yeah, and my short answer to that is we're not there yet. The urban forestry community isn't there yet, and I've seen many ways why we're not there. Brian and I have been the key staff working with Davey, our consultant, Davey Resource Group, on the street tree maintenance project. Shifting that, and a lot of those groups have done a lot of great work, but the things around equity and climate are still so new to them that they too have a lot to learn.
Okay, it's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah.
Daniel?
Hey, thanks. While, it's initially maybe seemingly disappointing that everything's getting put off with Title 11 changes for a year, I think it does allow us all some important time to do some things that we might not have been able to do if we had done it so quickly. And in particular, I'm thinking of this issue we've talked about here for years and also at the policy committee, which is that when we try to get public input on some of these issues, we certainly have our members here at UFC and our various committees, we have some people, but we've long talked about how the voices haven't really represented the full spectrum of people in the city. And since we now have a full year when we're going to try to, put forward Title 11 changes and, forest management plan update, I think there's really an opportunity for us to really talk about more how to go out and get to some of those people that have not been, represented in the UFC and the opinions we give. So I'm hoping we can maybe sooner rather than later talk about maybe some things we might do to go out as individual members of the commission or committees or whatever, to go out and get some of this input. I know we've talked about that recently on the policy committee, but I think since we now have a full year, we have an opportunity to do that. So I just wanted to throw that out.
Thanks, Daniel.
If I could respond to Daniel's comment, Vivek.
Yeah.
I want to put a fine point on timeframes, because you had said, Daniel, you know, it's unfortunate it has to wait a year. Nothing's waiting a year. What we were asked to do was bring back a high level scope of work to council. Like, what would we do and how would we do it? Not to actually do it. So that's been the plan till now, is just bringing this back to council, something that would say, yes, we will go and it will take this much resource and we need these staff to be hired and we will look at these types of questions, and for them to say, okay, go do that. That would be the extent of what they were asking for us to deliver by March. Instead, we're going to be bringing that as well as the forest management plan update. And we've split that, the amendments, into two things: quicker and shorter, because they're simpler to do, and then the more complex that are informed by the forest management plan. The only change, Daniel, is that they had set a rather arbitrary deadline of March 31st, and we're probably going to go to council a month or two after that to say, we've expanded on your directive, we're improving on it, we'll do that and all of this, and it's in a different order. Does that make sense?
The one clarification I guess I have is just, how does it work when a group of commissioners basically punt a responsibility to a new group of city commissioners that come on board? Can they just basically say, well, that was then, this is now. We have different, I mean, we're seeing this happen on the national level just yesterday with 17 executive orders, right? So part of it is kind of like, how much time are you putting into this? How much time is staff putting into this? And could it be just all for naught?
Great question, Vivek. And the short answer is yes, they could punt. Let's see, we have 3 new commissioners, right? Commissioner Ryan was relatively new when this was before him, and Commissioner Fritz is gone, who was the driver behind this. So part of the reason that we're going to move that time frame out closer to maybe May, and I'm saying May because we haven't even really been able to look at that specifically yet, instead of March, is we need time to orient these new commissioners. And you all have expressed interest. And as I said before, the commission is on the list for Commissioner Rubio to establish relationships and talk to council members about trees as a priority. And, you know, so they have that education and background. That extra time lets us do that. So we can use the opportunity at council to help the new city council members understand the importance of trees and support what we're all trying to do.
Okay.
There are a lot of competing interests, right? I'm sure you're all aware. Houselessness, COVID, the economic impacts of COVID. And those are the things I'm sure Commissioner Rubio and the other city council commissioners are having to focus on today. So I'm going to go back to what Daniel was saying. When it comes to the Forestry Commission, connecting with people and having people think about trees, I see a need for that type of awareness being developed with the new city council. And there are competing interests, good ones, that we will have to navigate as well. But if we don't want trees to fall off the radar, then we need to embrace that work. And that's kind of an all hands on deck moment, including for commission.
Thanks. Yeah, thank you. That's helpful. A little socializing to prepare folks to kind of say, yes, go forward. Greg?
2 things. One is that I think I might, and we may all benefit if we just a really rough calendar that says, you know, we go to council with this, we hope to get the tree asset management plan, you know, research done and then acquired and integrated, and we're going to use that in the urban forestry management plan or not. I mean, it just seems to me like you'd have a much better plan. I was at the Bureau and sort of peripheral to the 2 people who did the bulk of the work on the 2004 one, from planning and the planning section. And there's an amazing amount of data now that could be incredibly useful. So I guess I'd like to see that and just sort of the timeline, because, you know, it's not only city commissioners, it's this commission's members. Barbara Dane. They went here. Mike already left, and we're sort of, some of the longer experienced folks. So also on the commission level, you're going to be handing it off to people who probably, I mean, maybe they'll get their new job and they'll actually read the old plan or one of the kind of yearly kind of updates. But it's a lot to take in. And then I'd also say that second point is that as you're looking at the Bureau's funding, it's going to take BDS support, and they will tell you as soon as you decide that you're going to do this, that essentially they need like another Roberta Jortner. I mean, was so integral to creating Title 11. So that this, time and money, can we get a rough kind of envelope version of that?
Sure, great questions, Greg. Spoken like a true planner. Let's see, we've already been discussing with BPS as well as other bureaus and within our own bureau about floating this idea of we can do this now, so we want you to be part of it. So BPS already has this on their list and will be engaged. Same with BDS and other infrastructure bureaus as well. And let's see, cost, in addition to getting the staff baseline that we need to have to do this and all the other work that we're trying to do, thanks to the levy. In addition, we're looking at probably, I think our estimate was, and it is extremely rough, so please don't attach yourselves to these numbers because again, this is the work we need to do once we have staff in place. So it's really mostly Brian and Nick and I ballparking. We're thinking it's probably going to cost for the project anywhere from $200,000 to $300,000. And that may not be something we need to ask council for, depending on the status of the levy and other resources at the time. And then when it comes to the timeframes, Brian has worked closely on this, so I'm going to ask him to speak to what are our rough time estimates for the different aspects of this kind of three-part project.
Yeah, we can, and Greg, we can definitely provide. One of the things that we're developing is a project overview that will likely go to City Council. It'll be the sort of official document that's submitted to them, and that does detail the timeline. And as we get closer to going to City Council, that's definitely something we can share with the commission for your review and input and everything. But yeah, in general, what we're looking at is that sort of tune-up project would be probably a 6-month work from July to the end of 2021, early 2022. And then the Urban Forest Management Plan update would launch shortly after that. After that's completed, which again, we're looking at probably a 2-year project at that point. So, and yeah, we've definitely been in conversations with BPS, and they were the ones that actually were floating this idea of, well, maybe as you're doing the Urban Forest Management Plan update, since you're doing all this analysis and outreach work, maybe that project could also produce recommended substantive changes to Title 11 as part of the implementation of the updated plan. So definitely that Bureau collaboration paying off early as a really great thought, because it would, if we were to spend 2 years on Urban Forest Management Plan update and then maybe another year and a half on additional Title 11 amendments, you're looking at a 5-year plan. And if we're able to combine any of those stages and really leverage some of the community outreach work, that's obviously what we're going to do.
Well said.
Right.
Thank you.
But do you see using the total asset management plan in the urban forestry management plan, or would you literally just take the GIS as it is? I did street tree inventories for years. My neighborhood was done in 2012, so I mean they're out of date.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
Yeah, so the software need, we are not going to wait to do the forest management plan update for having all the data we might want to have. We have a lot of it now, and we will never have everything we want. And there's that thing they call analysis paralysis that I'm really sensitive to. As a person with a science background, I always want more data, and I want clean analyses, and I want objectivity, and I want to see what our outcomes and metrics are. But we don't want to be hamstrung by that And I don't feel that it'll be a significant problem. When it comes to street tree inventory, we are planning to revisit that soon because those data are old. And also we don't know the answer to this specifically, but I'll just share that, forest management plan update is a visionary document. It's at a higher level, right? So it will likely use a lot of the data that we have about specific street tree aspects or things like that, but it may not focus on them a whole lot. And I don't know yet. We'll see. That's part of the project.
All right. Thanks, Jen. Thanks, Brian. Thanks all for feedback on this. Sounds like we can kind of tie this up for now. And there's a lot here. Needless to say, we'll be revisiting this, I think, multiple times over the coming months. Just as we're closing out here, I'd like to just pivot to a final little exercise. No jumping jacks, I promise. We're a final exercise to just check in with you about future meeting agenda items. And thought I would just start that though with a little reflection on if you could go to a web browser. If you're on, imagine you're on a computer, and so I'm sharing my screen here. And if you could go to a web browser and just, there's no password, nothing required except going to this menti.com, MENTI.com. If you would just go to that and just, there's a code that you would put in to that. And I would just like to get your feedback quickly on, if you go to that website, you'll see a place to put in a code. It's 5153681. And you have 3 things you can put in on this. So let me pause there, see if there are any questions first. Okay, so just to get you a little sense, just to get an idea for what was one notable UFC achievement from 2020 as we're entering this new year, I just wanted to get your read on what you think we did well in 2020. I'm going to go in and also put in my own thoughts. Oops, can you still see the Menti? Okay, good. I changed my. And then if you put in 3, I think you have up to 3 options. If you put in 3, they'll start appearing on here just as you're starting to input your responses.
I don't see how to do this.
Oh, I see trees, update, big. Yeah, okay, keep it coming. Think back on 2020, lots of stuff going on. It's hard to kind of probably narrow down the stuff with UFC. Okay, cool. Work on Title 11. So the size of these apparently have to do with how many people said the same thing, but it does look like there's some clustering going on with commercial industrial change and then industrial, I see. Streets 2035, I see a couple of times. Industrial, yeah, good. Got about 4 people who responded so far. Anybody else want to chime in on this? Oh, Streets 2035 jumps out. as the leader. Okay. Just as in our last minute here, just one more question. This is a little more reflective. I'm going to take a little screen capture of this so I get it. And then, oops, present. Oh, bummer. What just happened? I lost it. Okay, the next one I'm hoping you can, provide here, if I can go to present, there we go, is what's an important item for UFC discussion in 2021? So the coming year, what would you like? It's the same code, so you just go to the next question on it. What would you like to see in 2021 come up as an agenda item for us? Okay, cool. Title 11. Get your stuff in there. And just to kind of hold this where it is. Okay.
Vivek, got to ask, is this a free service you can sign up for to use, or is it a pay service?
It's a free service. I can only get two. You only get 2 questions if you do the free service, but you can do as many as you want if you pay them a bit.
Great.
Yeah, but that's interesting. Maintenance. I see Title 11, Urban Forestry Management Plan. Whether it's T11 or T11 amendments and Title 11. Yeah. My little guy is going to turn 11 this year, so there's some synergy going on in my life with that. That's going to be fun. Cool. Eight of you. This is great. I'm going to hold on to this, and I'm going to bring it back up to Brian and Jen for a conversation about what aspects of this. Of course, these are broader concepts, and we're going to hone in on some of these, but this helps us at least give a little sense for what we might want to prioritize. And so this brings up this last thing I want to just put in the front of your mind as you go in and let this marinate over the next month. But the question of a retreat, historically, we've done a retreat. And just to think about that, and a long Zoom session just seems like it could be a little bit challenging. So just thinking about like, how do we do a retreat in this context without sitting here for 4 or 5 hours? And so, but if you have ideas about that, just send them my way, send them Brian, send them to Brian and me, and we'll find a way to explore the possibility of doing something. I'd love to do it when some new commissioners come on board, which is in the works. So you all know it's in the works. We've interviewed, and we're probably going to have some folks on relatively coming up soon here. I don't know exactly what the timing is. Brian, you have any input on that? But I'd love to do it when the new commissioners come on board, and we can kind of do it collectively and set an agenda. I don't know about you, but I'm definitely feeling a little more lightness on my feet come this year, even though the pandemic is still on us and all the other things are still raging right now. We might have a little clarity and a little direction that we can take advantage of these coming months early in the year. So let me know what you all think about that. I'd love to, personally, I'd love to have a retreat. It kind of helps us with all these interstitial conversations we're having in between the spaces of topics, and we're not getting to really talk to each other informally even. Be great to have a retreat where we have opportunities to have breakout rooms and discussions that way. It's my own personal preference, but we can come back to that.
And Vivek, can I share one thing before we all close out, which is I always wish that we got more time to hear from Vivek about the research that he's doing. And I am biased because I work for Portland Audubon, and I know that Vivek is going to be giving a presentation in March. So I know we haven't put it out publicly yet, so I don't have the details, but I will be wanting to share that with all of you, because I think we reference your research a lot, Vivek, but we don't always have the opportunities to actually hear you talk about it. So you're not going to bring it up. So I want to bring it up, and we'll be certain to share it with all of you once we have the details, so we can hear
Thanks,
more.
Megan. Happy to chime in. And if you're around February 9th morning, I have a presentation to the mayor of LA and their urban forestry team about urban forestry equity assessment that we did for the city of LA, which was no small item to work on with the number of people working down there. But happy to send info about that as well. But thanks, Megan. I will.
Would you send info, please?
Oh, sure. Yeah, happy to do that. I think they created a little catchy, I don't know if it's as catchy as End Petlessness flyer, but they definitely put something like that together for it. Well, thank you all. Appreciate your participation, engagement. We have a lot of stuff stewing here, so looking forward to February. And if any questions come up, any feedback, please send it along. And stay well. I'll use my.
Hey, before everybody signs off, we couldn't do our December breakfast like we normally do. And that's the time of year we also usually take a group picture. So Bruce, if you could turn your video on, I'm going to do a screen capture so we have a group picture.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
Nice, Anjanette's got it.
Oh, hold on, Anjanette. I'm gonna do another one. Hold on.
Yeah.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, trees. Okay, great. Thanks.
All right.
You could have warned the rest of us.
All right, everyone. Thanks all. Take care. We'll see you soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye.